So today we're talking about lordosis, and that would be the curvature right here of the lower back. And when you start to get lordosis, the curve will start to come inward. Imagine, sorry about that, glutes. This area here will be very much inward, and then sometimes we'll see kyphosis come in with it because the body is clearly out of balance, and at some point in the person's life, if it's not congenital, they were in a habitual postural deviation where they weren't in the right position doing what they were doing. They were either not strong enough to be doing what they were doing and they had to make corrections with their body to do the job, or they were in a position for too long and not staying strong enough to sit or stand in that position. So they started deviating from their pelvic position and creating there's lots of different ways that the pelvis can become imbalanced, but lordosis is sometimes considered a more common problem from weakness from people being very dominant through the front of their hip. I'm going to rotate this around. So this is a very lovely image of what the back looks like with some superficial muscle. Here's that latissimus dorsi and trapezius. Here's those rotator cuff muscles, the back of the deltoid, and that beautiful tricep. So let's take a layer off. This is such a wonderful program. So there's your first layer coming off, and there's the rhomboids that I've talked about. Now you can start to see the three rotator cuffs of the back side of the shoulder blade. Take another layer off, and there goes lats. And so here we have posterior serratus of the body, and then we have the spinal erectors deeper to that. And that's what we're going after right now. And then we take that off, and now we're at our spinal erector group. They're coming all the way down to the sacrum. They're going all the way up to the back of the neck, right at the back of the occiput. So they are a very large group. Now the center section and the spinal erectors are phasic, they're movers, but this section down here in the neck are not. So they're very prone to tightening when they get weak, and that's going to because they're supporting the lower back, and the lower back is supporting the upper body. It needs to have a curve to it. They will get short and tight when they get weak. So another good reason why we need to keep spinal erectors really happy. Now, I'm going to click on this so that you can see there's your spinal erection. So again, I have watched people do deadlifting because everybody wants to do deadlifting now. So I will ask them, listen, you have a very overdeveloped lower lumbar and a little bit of postural muscle in the center of your back. Let me see you do a deadlift. And when they do a deadlift, I'll see them lift the bar like this with their upper body, which is not correct. We want to focus on the lower section of the spinal erectors moving from the hip when we do those deadlifts. This type of movement is going to, when weighted, is going to encourage this section to develop posturally, and that's going to end up being uh, uh, in the long run a little bit detrimental to your posture. So there are three different sections of a spinal erectors. We're not going to get into that today. They also do lateral flexion. So this is that lateral line. So they'll keep the spine really nice and healthy as they do that. If you notice, this section is not moving. We have all the movement coming down here from the lumbar. And one of the reasons is because that rib cage isn't allowing this section to do uh, movement through the center section, which is good. We want to keep the stronger movements into the loaded movements into this. This is loaded because it's weighted. This is a big weight. You have the whole upper body weighted into that muscle. And here's what I wanted is that anterior tip. And look, there it is right there. There is your lordosis, the lordotic curve of the lower back. If the interior part of iliacus, which is a postural muscle, gets tight and short, it is going to pull this muscle into, or pull the lower back into a greater curve. And then if the spinal erectors of the lower back get short and weak, we have a double whammy. So we're going to be working on that today. I'm also going to show you abdominals because that is your opposite to this muscle. So let's go back and look at our torso again. We're going to rotate it around. Oh, we did a little spin on that one. So here's the linea alba down the center of the body. That's the piece of connective tissue that connects the rectus abdominal together. And let's layer this up a little bit more because that's really deep. All right. So here is our rectus abdominal. All right. I gave you a little bit too much information on that. I went all the way down to the deep core. So this is the linea alba down the center here. If you have had a very soft life and you have not had a lot of movement and your rectus abdominal and your rectus sheath have not been properly maintained, then the linea alba can sometimes stretch and move outward, and you'll feel a slight opening down the center of that. If you've been pregnant, same thing. So there are ways to help move that together, just gently moving the hands inward towards the rectus abdominal, and we'll go into that in a corrective states later or if people ask me for it. But this, you can see it, if I light this whole thing up, it's going to say abdominal muscles. But the oblique on the side of the waist here, and then there's a internal oblique on the inside of that. That is, the internal oblique is postural and the external is phasic. So everything you see right now on the waistline is phasic. It has to be maintained. It has to be exercised. And that's going to keep the back healthy. And when people say, oh, do abdominal crunches to have a healthy back? Yes, absolutely. But it is more than that, right? And the reason why I'm going to tell you why it's more than that, because I'm going to give you the iliacus clues after I get through this. But there's rectus abdominal, there's external oblique, moving downward and inward. We'll see rectus abdominal over here. That's that six pack, and then there's a eighth underneath that goes all the way to the pubic bone. I talk about that in the video. The internal oblique is more postural. The external oblique is more phasic, but you can see how the movements are. The internal moves away as the external moves inward. And then I'm not going to go into transversus because that's a deep line. We'll go into that later. All right, so there's rectus abdominis. Now, the muscle I really want to get to, see if I can get to it, is, I think I lost it, is down here. Here's psoas major, and here's iliacus, and together they're iliopsoas. So, you may have heard a lot about this muscle. It's a quite complicated muscle because it's attached into the lumbar vertebra, and then it goes through a hole in the pelvic bone, and it attaches to the top of the leg bone. And then it attaches in with this muscle here to the top of the leg bone. They work together at this point, but at this point, it is, while you have a very arched back, this is going to be in a shortened position. And I'll show you why. Let's go to There it is there. All right. So this section here on the muscle, when it contracts, it pulls the lumbar vertebra inward. And then this section will elongate because this is where the hip flexion part of the muscle is. So if we look at the hip flexion, this is now stable and grounded, and then this muscle attachment site is lifting the leg. And then when you get into a full sit-up position, now this section is grounded to say, and now this section is doing the lift. And then if you go into the increasing lordosis, if we go into increasing lordosis, you can see that that section shortens as it comes up. So it works with iliacus on that. So you've got a double whammy with this muscle. And iliacus, and this is a lot of information because this is a complex problem. So now that we have the femur fixed here, and then we have the muscle of the iliacus is when it's shortening, it's going to lift the lower back off of the mat. So when you get down onto the mat, if you can't get your back within a small, I would say where you could fit your fingertips underneath your lower lumbar, if it's higher than that, then you have a short psoas on the lumbar part. You have a short iliacus, and you may even have a short lumbar vertebra spinal erector. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to pin and stretch that. We're going to start to learn to pelvic tip without the glutes, and then we're going to do some abdominal exercises to strengthen that. So fun stuff, complex but very necessary. And then the other thing that I did not go into was the sacral plexus. So let me get that. All right, so this is the sacral plexus. And this is what becomes very important because as this plexus runs under piriformis, which is a muscle that is attached from the sacrum to the pelvic bone, from in here to the pelvic bone. And when that gets short and weak and tight, because it is a postural muscle and it's got if you're not exercising and this pelvis starts to get tipped and that muscle starts to get strained, then you're going to crimp down on this plexus. So keeping this whole area healthy is going to be really important. And these nerves feed your legs. So there's posterior and anterior divisions. And let me see if I can get the anterior division here. There it is. All right. And then these are going to control all the muscles in the legs and your feet and everything from that point down. And I'm not going to get really complex with it. However, if you have, and these are going to start fusing together anyway. The actual central canal where um, the spinal cord only goes to L3, and then the spinal nerves are coming off of this past that point. So we don't have, stenosis past this point. This is going to fuse together as you get older, and it starts when you're actually probably closer to 40, L3, L4, L5. These start to become very, very much shallow and calcified. But these nerves are still going to remain healthy if you maintain your exercise because they're going to be in a good position. The minute you start to let this shift, you're going to be much more vulnerable to getting numbness, tingling, dysfunction at the leg, Charlie horsing, if that's what you would want to call it, rather than having it called something complicated. Getting muscle spasms because the nerves are going to not be sending the signals properly. And then you also have the next point, which is going to be your venous system is also coming through here. And that's not going to be getting good supply. So really, the long and short of this discussion is you gotta move. Exercise is absolutely the one of the three keys to the triangle. Movement, movement, movement. So start doing this. I put together a couple movement videos. They might be harder, but just get them, take them down to your level. I have some 5 minutes, I have some 10 minutes, I have some 15 minutes. You all have 5 minutes to do something. I tell people, they always like, oh, you're so busy, you're so busy. Well, I'm busy and I'm making these videos for you because I want everybody to be healthy. So if I can make these videos for you, you can get up and do it for me or for yourself. Probably better to say for yourself because I don't expect you to do anything for me. All right, so there it is. There's some good education for you. Let's go to work. All right, so we've got some muscles to cover here. I wanted to just show you some of the associated pains with lordotic curves that you move towards lordosis. And this is the back section of the spinal erectors. There's a few trigger points in here that you may recognize. And again, where there is some pain where the trigger points are, the majority of the pain does go towards the hip and the section of the back where people may say they have SI joint dysfunction, which in my opinion is bullshit. So this is really important, especially if you're a therapist, to recognize that these points are going to move downward from the spinal erectors. So if you have a weak, tight spinal erector that is very, very lordotic and being put into a really shortened position and overused because it's carrying so much weight where the position that it's in. Look at these big points. If you're doing this self-correctively yourself, when we did the pin and stretches, or when you're doing the pin and stretches on this video, don't hesitate to take that little ball, the soft balls, and start up here and move down. So you do one stretch there, one stretch there, one stretch there, one stretch there, and then you can go back up to make it, 4 down, 4 up, and then call it a day. All right. So you can see how high these go up. I find a lot of postural deviation here because this section is not supposed to be postural. And then I find people that will tell me they have pain in their hip and they're like, oh yeah, it's right there. And of course it's not right there because that's glutes and there's not really a lot, maybe hamstring at the top of there, but where this is really more than likely not going to be the problem. You may find some tightness in glute maximus just because of the deviation of posture, but more than likely not. So that is your trigger points on your lower back. Now let's move to the hip flexor. Now this is psoas and iliacus. And so these are put together because I was taught like this where it's iliopsoas. So we have a trigger point in iliacus, which is here. And then we have a trigger point in psoas here, and you can see, and the trigger point here, these two are radiating into the back. This is in the middle. It's kind of sandwiched between the lower back muscles and the abdominal muscles, but one trigger point, the two trigger points inside radiate into the back, and then the trigger point down at iliacus radiates into the front of the thigh, which a lot of people may think that they have issues with their quadricep, where it is actually that iliacus where you have to rotate that leg out to get to this attachment site. So again, a little hidden, so you don't know this. These treatments, you have to go in through the front into this hip, and that's why I do the pin and stretch, where you're going into that center, the inside of the hip. Next, we're going to go into abdominals. Abdominals are very interesting. I'm going to start with this one. All right. So, abdominals are a visceral somatic muscle. They are a phasic muscle, a mover. What visceral somatic means is if you get stomach pain, your abdomen trigger points can become active. If your abdomen trigger points become active, you can get stomach pain. So, when you're experiencing stomach pain, sometimes the first thing you do is go and get something for your stomach. However, do you remember a long, long time ago, back when things seemed like so much simpler, that your mom would rub your stomach and it would make it feel better? That's the first thing you want to do. Now you know where these trigger points are. Get those hands onto your stomach. I will actually, if I have a stomach ache, I will actually just take my hands and put them onto my abdomen muscle, and the heat and the piezoelectricity from my hands will take my stomach pain away. Almost within 5 minutes. Try it, it works. But now that you see where these trigger points are for these pain points, now you can start to understand if you press on these areas and you feel pain, you've got an active trigger point. And you can see that abdominal trigger points actually radiate into the back. This is actually can be almost mimic like a female heart attack. And this can mimic kidney pain as well as appendicitis. So you can see all the relationships with the nervous system, the internal visceral organs, and then pain patterns. And they all work together. So we don't want them to become chronic because then they become systemic. Let's go to the next abdominal, which I really wanted to show you these abdominals. Let's do this one. All right, so here's two trigger points that create dysmenorrhea, which is painful period cramping. Okay, so notice where they are. They are really close to the female sexual organs. Now, I just told you that abdominals is visceral somatic. So guess what? When you get your period, these two trigger points can get set off and they can create cramping. And then if their trigger points are set off, you can feel like you have cramping. So put those hands down there and start massaging that little number 7 and number 8 um, abdominal, and I guarantee you're going to feel better. And then this is another trigger point down really close to the pubic bone. And let me show you one that's really fantastic. External oblique up by the top, out by the back, right at the back of external oblique, and in the front area where it attaches into by the rib cage. That creates almost like a pancreatic type of pain. This is a belch button, which means if you press on it and it's got a trigger point, it'll make you burp. And then look at these two, where they go down into. They go down towards that male testicle. And these trigger points, and there's a lot of them, can cause diarrhea. Now, this is my book from Janet Travell from, I went to school in the 90s, and this book was older than me. So I have been telling people this for years. If you do work that has a lot of abdominal in it, and you start to experience things like this, get your abdomen worked on. I don't even think they teach abdominal massage in school anymore. I think there is some crazy uh, rule out there that says that it has some sexual connotation to work on the abdominals. I don't know about you, but I went to art school and people were naked in front of me while I was drawing. There was nothing sexual about it. It was art. Abdomen muscles are so important. We need to be getting them worked on. If you are embarrassed to have your abdominal worked on by a massage therapist, you have two hands. You can work on them yourself. So please do your due diligence and get this worked because it is such an important muscle to keep the intestinal system of the lower abdominal area from the pancreas to the reproductive system healthy. So there you go. Some more information to make you sound smarter while you're at a dinner party.
All right, so we're talking about lordosis today. Lordosis is the over curvature of the lower back. We'll find that we get this as we get older. Some people are born congenitally with more of a curvature in their back, and they start getting kyphosis. A lot of that is due to mineral imbalances between minerals. Copper is a huge part of bone dysfunction. So when we're looking at somebody as they get older, and as a therapist, when somebody comes in, I'll immediately bring them into a position to see if they have a tucked under, very flat back, or if they have a very overarched back. And with that, I'll know immediately what the abdominal area is doing. And so after this video, you can go to the abdominals and you can watch how to start doing abdominals correctly. So the things that you're thinking of is when you're sitting, that you don't feel your abdomen popped out, that we have a nice tucked in abdomen. And this is what happens when people pull their abdomen in, they tend to push their back into a flat position. So we want to stand upright and try to draw our abdomen in and lift the rib cage up. It takes practice and it takes time, but with all the exercises that you're doing today and you're moving forward with, you'll eventually be able to start to correct things as they weaken. Abdomen's going to weaken really quickly because it's phasic, and it's going to start to lengthen from the pubic bone and the rib cage. It's going to start to get longer, and when that gets longer, it gives the opportunity for that lower back to have to do more work. So we want to really keep the abdomen in check, and that's why a lot of these exercises that I'm going to focus on are going to really go after those phasic movers, because if they're not being contracted and you're not getting that brain to muscle connection, they're going to get weak and they're going to get long. So that lower back is going to start to become very, very hyperextended. And what will usually happen is you'll see people get a lordotic, and then a kyphotic, and then a lordotic curve, because their eyes always have to meet the horizon, and when that happens, it's going to always change the neck accordingly. So there's so many variables, everybody's different, but I'm going to try to give you the best that I can give you based on what I've seen so far in my career. And the first thing I tell people is when I see thick spinal erectors in that lower back, and they're feeling like they have leg issues, like their legs are starting to go numb, or they may have pain in their hips, I tell them you got to look at the sacral plexus. The sacral plexus is the nerve bundles that are going down through that lower lumbar. When the curve is too deep and it's got a lordotic curve to it, and you've got lordosis of the lower lumbar, it's going to start affecting the nerve patterns down those legs. The minute that you start getting your abdomen stronger and you start getting the balance between the abdominals and the spinal erectors, and then the psoas muscle and the iliacus muscle can start to sit in the right position, you're going to notice that your legs are going to feel much better. And with that is going to come you being able to do better workouts. It gets worse before it gets better. Always keep that in mind and make sure that you know that you have, I call it the 3 rule in everything. The first 3 days are seeming like they're going to be wonderful, and then by the end of the 3 weeks, you're ready to quit. Don't quit. By the end of the 3 months, you're going to start to really see some nice changes. And if you can stick it in there for 3 years, you are on your way to having all of these wonderful habits built into you so that you continue to move forward with a proactive. We're never going to be perfect. We're always going to have genetic differences. Some people are going to be genetically more capable of straightening out than others, but the more you do for self-help, the less problems you're going to have as you age and you move forward in life. So with that said, onward and forward, you'll see some pelvic work on the floor next, and then a little bit of pin and stretch, and then you'll go to the corrective exercises for abdominals.
All right, so we're learning about lordosis and having too much of an arch in the lower back. Now, as I talked about before, this happens to people as they get older if they have more dominancy at the front of their hip or their hip flexors, depending on your job. So we're gonna do first a pin and release. Now, this is your, trying to find the muscle which is inside of the hip joint, iliacus. Tipping the pelvis may help you get your fingers inside the joint or inside the bone of the pelvis, and that's going to shorten the muscle right there. And then if you just hold your fingers and pull the tailbone down and let the back arch up, that's going to be the stretch. So you're going to stick the fingers in again, you're going to tip the pelvis, and then you're going to hold that fingertip into the joint, and you're going to draw the pelvis down to open up that muscle, and then release. And you can go a few different spots, tipping the pelvis, flattening the back, and then moving the pelvis back behind you to open that up. And then put those fingers in, tip the pelvis, and then open that muscle up. Now the lower back muscles are also going to be tight. So what we can do is we can just gently put our hands underneath our lower back with our knuckles like this, and then we're going to gently push into our knuckles and then tuck the pelvis under, and then bring it up, gently push the muscle of the lower back into the fingers, and then tuck and lengthen. Good. And again, now if you have like a small double ball, you can do it with that. I'll show you that in a second. But if you only have your hands, you could just put them underneath there, and then you're going to tuck the pelvis.
One ball with the piece in the middle, or you can even use you could use a roll towel if you want. That would work. You're going to put this right down underneath where your back is going to lay.
All right, so I have that under my back right now. It's pushing my abdomen upward. You can see it's making my back slightly lordotic. And we're going to gently push in, and then we're going to tuck that pelvic bone just a little bit. I don't want you to lift it up off the mat. I'm going to show you what not to do right now. Don't do this. All right, that's going to incorporate too much of the internal parts of the hip, and it could end up giving you a back pain. I just want you to gently move the pelvis under you and downward, and then relax. And again, nice deep breath in, exhale, and tip, 2, 3, and release and relax, inhaling. And then on the exhale, it's stretch, 1, 2, 3, and relax to that. And 3 is a really nice number though, because it doesn't allow the body to sit into a position for too long. But I can feel this ball on my lower spinal erectors like I showed you in the video, and it's triggering them off right now. I can feel a little bit of trigger point in there. So a reminder again, and I say this every time we work, if you feel it, it's going to eventually bother you during the day. It might feel good for a few hours, but then 4 or 5 hours after that, you're going to start to feel that pain come back, or you may initiate that pain. So this is gradual. Do not do it again in one day. You do not want to aggravate it. Try to keep this really slow and steady. Do it 1 time a day, maximum. 3 times to 5 times, holding it for 3 seconds. Maybe that's about it for that. And then past that point, if you want to do your pin and stretches with your front iliacus, you can do that as well. So as this comes down, this muscle is going to start to shorten. All right, so that's the pin and stretch for lordosis. This is the video for abdominals level 1, and it's going to be a very important part of a lordotic curve. Right now, my lower back is not on the mat. A proper lower lumbar curve should not be on the mat. There should be a little space for you to fit something underneath there. However, if there's too much space, that means that the front part of the pelvis is drawing you down. Now, depending on what you do, everybody has different places that their physiology and their kinesiology, their movement is going to go to during the day. Abdominals is just a great way for people to keep this strong. The abdominals attaches all the way down to the pubic bone and up into the rib cage. The hip flexors inside of the abdominals are really strong. So it's very easy to walk around using your hip flexors instead of your abdominals. Abdominals are a phasic movement muscle, so unless you ask them to do it, they're just going to hang out, and eventually they're going to get long. When this longest section of the abdominal gets too long, it's going to let that pelvis go, and it's going to end up letting that back move into a lordotic curve. Now, most of the time, the lower back and the neck tend to meet each other with their curves. Not always, but a lot. So that means if your lower back is curved, you're more than likely you have a hyperextension at your neck as well. So as you correct your lower back curve, your neck will naturally correct from your posture. Level 1 abdominals is going to be easy. It's going to be head protected with the hands clasped behind it so that we have the weight of the head onto the hands. Now I'm going to blow a whole bunch of people out of the water with this because I'm sure everybody has heard this, to stare at the ceiling when you do abdominals. Now watch my neck when I stare at the ceiling. Do you see my chin moving? I'm using my neck muscles. We're not working our neck muscles right now. We're trying to work our abdominals. So with my hands clasped behind my head and me trying to stay neutral and together through my rib cage and my vertebral column, when I crunch, look at where my head goes naturally. It follows the same arch as the movement that I'm working with in my abdomen. So let's go ahead and get started with that correction. We're going to take that abdomen and we're going to gently pull it in. We're going to tuck the pelvis. And then we're going to release the pelvis. And this is your warm-up. Tuck the pelvis, pull the abdomen in, and release. Good. We're going to do about 5 of these just to warm up. This is a good way for you to get that back long and for you to understand where your abdominal muscle is, contracting it and releasing it. When you get really good at this, you'll be able to contract your abdomen without even moving. It's a really wonderful thing to do online at the grocery store. I just did it. All right, so now let's do our crunches. So tuck, there's your exhale, and there's your inhale. Now this is going to be a 1 count movement. I want to show you a couple first. All right, now take it to a 1 count. So it's going to be 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. I'm taking my pelvis and I'm tipping it and I'm releasing it through each one. 1, 7, 1, 8, 1, 9, 1, and 10. Very good. Now, the next one we're going to do is we're going to displace the hip flexors by taking the feet together and the knees apart. And we're going to have a little harder of a time getting the pelvis tipped now, but we're going to be able to get less hip flexor in and more abdominal towards its attachment site at the pelvic bone where the pubic bone is, where the pubic attachment is. So we're going to, again, crunch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep that pelvic tipping. Make sure that you're working through that so that you have that back flattening. 2 more. 9 and 10. Very good. All right. Next, I'm going to just try to get you to understand the energy of the muscle with a little bit of the neuromuscular kinetic work. So I want you to move your hands down to the base part where the abdomen attaches the pubic bone. So you'll find the pubic bone where that bony process is, and then it'll sink in. That's where your abdominal attachment is. Now I want you to push your heels gently together and try, and this is going to be really hard because I usually test people with their fingers in their abdomen, but I want you to think about trying to lift the feet and not lift the feet, all right? So if I was to lift the feet, my feet would come up, but I don't want you to do that because that's going to incorporate your legs. So I want you to pretend you're going to lift your feet, but then not lift your feet, all right? And you can see that if you go too high, the pelvis wants to move with you because the hip flexors get involved a little bit. So we want to just contract the abdomen and release the abdomen. Contract the abdomen and release the abdomen. Now this takes a little bit more work. I just want to teach you it so that you can start working on it. And then as you get better, you'll really start to feel this. Just, I can contract it and release it without doing anything. It's a really good brain to body exercise. All right. And so that's that abdominal. We're going to bring it together. I'm going to show you the attachment between abdominals and obliques. So hands behind your head, and this is going to be another big correction. So we're going to rotate the rib cage towards that left, bring it down, and then rotate the rib cage towards the left, towards the right, and then bring it down. So it's going to lift, release, lift. So here's all my corrections. Notice my eyes. They're following my upper body where my rib cage is going. Notice where my elbows are. They're not coming in. My elbows are staying put, and I'm rotating with my rib cage. Notice how my arm, you might not be able to see my left arm, but you notice how my right arm stays onto the ground. Now this is partially abdominal, partially oblique. So we can work between a 1 and a 2, 1, 2, 1, down, 1, 2, 1, down, 1, 2, 1, down, 1, 2, good. And let's do some singles with it. So it's 1, 1, 1, 1, good. And you can keep going with these till about 20, trying to get that abdominal to just move outside the box just a little wider into the oblique. It'll also be a good check for you to make sure that you are not using your shoulders to make up imbalances through the hip or the rib cage. And we're done. Good. All right. So now abdominals being a phasic muscle, you're going to really want to make sure that you start to feel that. At the beginning, it is not unusual for people not to be able to fire their abdominal. So don't worry about it. It'll come in time. Now, your program for those should be, because I'm going to do a full abdominal program once we get to obliques. But you could do 10 each of the first 2, do a few of those kinetic responses on that lower one, and then do 10 total or 20 alternating on the oblique to abdomen attachment. And that'll give you 30 abdominal exercises to do as part of your finishing routine. You might want to do those every time you work out. Very good.